Hi, I'm Jacob with National Fleet Products, and today we're demonstrating the install process of a WM Systems Swivel loading ramp in a high roof Dodge RAM ProMaster. This video will apply to all versions of the Dodge RAM ProMaster. It's going to encompass all roof heights and wheelbase lengths. Today's install happens to be a left-hand swivel loading ramp. We do have right-hand swivel versions available. If you happen to have the right-hand swivel, every step is going to be simply flip-flopped. It's the mirror version. But other than that, the steps will be identical, so please follow along. Today's video is the second in a three-part series. The first video covered the installation of the mounting hardware. This video will cover the mounting of the ramp and its necessary adjustments. The third video will cover ramp operation, and we're going to take measurements of the space that the ramp and the mounting plate occupy inside the cargo area. As covered in the previous video, the hardware that we're demonstrating today is part of our new no-drill hardware. With this design, no drilling into the vehicle's body is required. There's only going to be a few tools required to complete the install. First, we're going to want to have two 13mm crescent wrenches. You're also going to want to have two 17mm crescent wrenches and one 6mm Allen wrench. Using these simple tools, we're going to complete the ramp install in about 20 to 30 minutes. In preparation for mounting the loading ramp, I'm going to want you to locate this large bag, and let's open this up. You'll find there's two packages inside. We'll start with the heavier one. If we open this, you will find our mounting shoe and passenger side lock. Here's our mounting shoe, our passenger side lock, and another bag where you will find a black handle and your bolts and washers. Upon opening, you'll notice that there is going to be 4 identical short bolts. You are supplied one extra, I'll note, along with your 4 washers. And you'll note there's going to be one longer bolt. Usually this nut is still on it. It's already been pre-threaded on. This acts as a limit. And what you're going to do is take your mounting shoe and thread this in from the side. Give it a home right away. You don't need to get a lot of thread in there, but spin it in. If it happens to be tight, go ahead and grab your 13mm wrench and spin this in a little bit. Once that's in, we can go ahead and place it over here on the side. You'll notice that we have supplied pre-threaded holes in 2 positions for our standard swivel ramps. The inner one here is going to be a 37-inch swivel ramp, and the outside is a 47-inch. Today we're going to be installing a 47-inch, so we'll place this over here and have it line up. If you'd ordered a custom size width ramp, we would have pre-drilled and threaded these holes for you in that location as well. Once you have this positioned and placed, what we're going to do is take these smaller bolts, put a washer on them, and just get them loosely threaded in to start. Finger tight is all that's required right now. Next, I'd like you to take the black handle, and we can place this over here. There's 2 holes provided. Depending on how this all lines up, you might use one or the other, but to get started, we're just going to start with the outside hole. And if you get this in, you'll notice you can't fully spin this around. It's a good time to mention that this is got a little bit of a ratcheting feature where the handle will lift. So it acts like a kip handle, so you can get it threaded, lift, and restart the process to get this in. Next, let's open our other bag. It'll be easily identified by having 2 foam blocks and a yellow nylon block in it. If we open this up, we're going to take those foam blocks. You'll notice they come with a pre-adhesive backing on them. We can set these aside. They're going to be used at the very end. You'll notice standalone, there's a metal bracket with this nylon finger on the back. This is going to be our passenger side finger here. And another bag, if we open this up, that simply has one metal finger in it, as so. And again, your bolts and washers. You will have 6 bolts and 6 washers. Now the important thing to note is this passenger side finger, this is directional. So when this gets placed here, it needs to slightly overlap into the center. And you'll notice when this nylon block is in position as well, they're going to trap the foot of the ramp in there and give it a home. I will mention this piece here, this passenger side lock, gets set aside, and we'll use that in our next step. At this point, we're nearly ready to get the ramp into position and stand it up. At this point, our hardware has been installed and we are ready to attach our loading ramp. However, there's a few things I'd like to cover before we actually get started picking it up. And it's important to note that this is a bifold ramp, and so what tends to happen is if you were to lift this, that bottom leaf wants to swing open. It makes it difficult to maneuver and handle. It can also cause some damage. So it is important to lift appropriately. And what you're going to want to do is reach underneath the ramp and lift up from below. You don't want to be grabbing at this spring or at this side rail. And your intention here is to get this mounting shoe in between these 2 welded feet and to get this nylon bushing placed right here into the mounting shoe, and that'll allow it to be stood up and be manageable and safe. So I like to start here on the driver's side. I like to lift this, get my hands underneath, and then get a helper. I will mention this ramp weighs about 200 pounds, so you will need 2 sets of hands. And you'll have to lift that side and shimmy it over a little bit. Keep lifting. There we are, now we're in. And at this point, now that it's stood up, what you want to do is get the foot of this ramp here flushed up with your welded feet. So for me, it's going to require pushing it in a little bit. And everything here should be flush on the end. You go ahead and take your yellow nylon block finger plate, slip this in for the passenger side, and grab 3 of your bolts with washers and get these finger tight. Just loosely thread them in. Okay, onto the driver's side plate. It's important to note that this is a directional plate. So when it gets placed onto there, it needs to slightly overlap onto the mounting foot. If it's in reverse, it won't do anything at all. So make sure you have the orientation correct. And it's also important to note that the foot of that ramp will be cantered a little bit to the passenger side. It won't be sitting flat. It'll be at a pitch. And so you just want to get these bolts started so that everything moves a little quicker when your partner has to lift that other side there. So we'll just get this prepped. Choke up the threads as much as possible here. Okay, at this point, they're all finger tight. And what's going to happen is your helper is going to lift on their side, which will bring that foot into alignment. You'll have a whole lot more thread exposed. Go ahead and choke that up real quick so he doesn't get tired on you. And you want to go ahead and tighten these down. It's important to note, do this by hand. Don't use an impact. The heads of these bolts could snap off. So while you want them tight, do not over tighten. Okay, at this point, the ramp will nearly hold its weight itself. It'll hold up really nicely. And you could, at this point, you have your driver's side finger plate installed and tightened down. You could swivel the ramp out of the way to gain a little bit easier access for this other finger plate. And you want to go ahead and tighten this down as well. The first thing we're going to try to adjust is our mounting shoe. Now that the ramp is, of course, standing up in here, and we can see where this side would land, we want to approximate the passenger side. And I can tell that this one's sitting to the rear a little bit. And remember, we didn't fully tighten down these 3 bolts that hold the mounting shoe in, so we should be able to get down here and massage it just a little, in our case, closer to the driver, and put it in a position of at least evenness. This is going to allow us to put everything together and deploy the ramp. We'll double check this positioning at the very end. So if you're in a good spot, go ahead and take the ramp, lift it up and over the shoe, and go ahead and swing it out. We're going to take our 13mm crescent wrench and tighten these 3 down. Continuing on, we're going to be installing our passenger side locking mechanism. So I'd ask you to swivel the ramp out. Again, we'll take our passenger side lock here, and this is simply going to slip in here. Make sure it has full movement and you haven't installed your black handle too far, just so that you have all the room to adjust. And what you're going to do is push the ramp in, and this white nylon bushing here is going to go into the jaws of the lock. You're going to get up close, and you're going to notice because we haven't fully adjusted it, it's going to be sagging. We're going to fix that later. But you're going to go ahead and grab and lift up both on the locking mechanism and on the ramp to get it in. Okay, now the goal here is going to be to slide or feather that lock mechanism left and right. And we want to make sure it's getting good contact on our white nylon bushing. It needs to be as far to the left as possible without beginning to touch the metal part of the bracketry on the ramp here. We'll get a close-up photo showing you what that looks like, but pretty easy to move it left or right and get it dialed in. Okay, and once it's in a position that you like, what we're going to do is we're going to take that black handle, and remember it has a little bit of a ratcheting feature on it, and you're just going to be threading this in. Sometimes it helps to hold the lower section. You can spin it to speed it up. And once it gets some tension on there, you'll notice you can really lock it in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and lift that passenger side lock, swing the ramp out, and at this point, this black handle is locked in our passenger side lock, and it's in a good spot for the future. We're going to continue on. We're going to take a 13mm wrench, and we're going to start with our limit adjustment here on the side. You'll remember we started with this horizontal bolt here. We put that in right away. And what we're going to do is spin the nut back that's already on there and start threading that bolt head in. Mine's a little stiff, so I am going to put a wrench on it here. And what's going to happen is as this bolt spins in, it's going to make contact with our lock. And once it makes good contact with the lock here, we can go ahead and spin that nut over. Put your 13mm crescent on there, crank down on that nut, make it a locking nut. And what this does is every time we release this black handle and we remove the lock, it allows for perfect positioning when it slides back in. All you'd have to do is then use your black handle to tighten it down. And again, that way we know every time we shut the ramp here, we know that that has good grip on the ramp side itself. Moving along, we're going to fix the drop When you swivel that ramp out, there was some drop. It didn't hold its weight. That is not ideal. This ramp should nearly hold its weight. There will, of course, be some flex in the body and the plates, but it should not drop like it did, and you'll see that in the final product here. But to begin, you're going to take your 13 millimeter wrenches. Go ahead and kneel down, and you're going to notice there is 3 horizontal bolts in a triangle type pattern down here. You're going to go in on the nut side of it, and you're going to want to loosen this nut off where it's been tightened down to about a thread, maybe a thread and a half. Loosening it further doesn't do you any favors, so don't take them off or anything like that. Just back them off slightly. And if you need to, have your second 13 millimeter wrench over here to keep the bolt head from spinning. Okay, at this point, our 3 nuts have been loosened. And what's important to note here is the plate that those nuts were touching has been threaded. So that nut was acting like a double locking nut. And what we're going to want to do next is put our crescent wrench on the head side of the bolt and back that head off about half a thread. Okay, and at this point, our heads have been backed off, our nuts have been backed off, and what we've done is we've loosened a slip plate. And your next step is going to be to take your 13 millimeter wrench and your 6 millimeter Allen. And you'll notice there is a vertical bolt here. You're going to take the 6 millimeter Allen on the cap end of the bolt on the bottom, and your 13 millimeter wrench up on top. And in this case, our ramp had dropped. So we're going to be tightening that bolt to lift that passenger side. Sometimes that side tends to float, and you'll need to do the reverse. Loosen it over here and drop it down. And I like to start with maybe 2 threads, and then we'll check it. And lift your passenger side lock, and bring the ramp out. We still have quite a bit of drop there. Let's go ahead and lift it back in and continue to adjust. Okay, that looks a lot better. Let's check it. It still is using the ramp of that lock. It's got a little bit of an incline on the lock mechanism. I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more turns here. Okay. All right, and if you were able to see that, you have that lock lifted with your right hand, and you push that ramp in with your left. You'll notice it held its weight, and it didn't need to use any of that incline to help itself in there. And again, that way, when you go to swivel the ramp out, it comes out real nicely. Stores, just the same. To complete the drop adjustment, again, now that we've had this leveled, you're going to come back over to the driver's side and get your 13 millimeter wrench. Start on the head side of the bolt, on this case the driver's side, and you're going to want to go ahead and thread that into the slip plate. And because you've only loosened it about a half a thread, these go back in real quick and easy. At this point, grab your second wrench, put it onto the nut side. Make sure you have your original one on the head side so you keep the bolt from spinning, and tighten up those nuts. Okay, moving on. let's do a couple other adjustments. The first thing I'm going to want you to do is actually deploy the ramp now. And so what we're going to do is place our left hand on the ramp and push in a little bit. When we go to move this lever over here, sometimes it's stuck because it hasn't been adjusted yet, so that'll take the pressure off it. So simply push in on the ramp, come over here, and pull this lever towards you or towards the rear. Then grab with each hand one of the handles on the side and walk the ramp out. We're going to double check our passenger side mounting shoe. The left here kind of dictates everything, so that's the first measurement you're going to want. And I see I'm at about 4 1/8 or so, 4 1/4. And here I'm at 3 3/4. So what I need to do is stow the ramp. Go ahead and swivel the ramp out. Loosen the black handle. Pull your lock out. Take your 13mm wrench. And again, in this case, I had the lock shoe too far in towards the driver. Roughly 1/2 inch, maybe a little less. Go ahead and take your 13mm wrenches. We take our 13mm wrench here and we loosen up these bolts that hold the shoe in. And I want to be sure to push it back towards the rear of the vehicle. Go ahead and lock that in. Replace the mounting shoe. Go ahead and tighten your black handle. And let's store the ramp and double check our work. About 4 1/4. 4 1/8. That is close enough. You just want to make sure it's not deploying too crooked off the back of the vehicle. At this point, the mounting shoe has squared up the back of the ramp, so we know it's level across the rear of the vehicle. And we're going to be adjusting the pitch of the ramp, the distance it leans from the rear doors. And you'll notice if I shut this door, if you were to have been able to, you can even see it makes contact. And that may or may not be desirable. If you had maybe a bunch of shelving or a very full vehicle or maybe a van life build out where you wanted to have this as far to the rear as possible to gain the maximum amount of cargo space, this is an okay position for it. You could have it make constant contact with the rear doors. However, most people don't want to have any contact with the body. And so what we're going to do is we're going to deploy the ramp and do what we call the rubber bumper adjustment. Simply unlock, grab your handles, deploy. And you'll notice by having deployed the ramp, it exposes 2 rubber bumpers. There's one here on the driver's side and one here on the passenger side. The driver's side one dictates everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen this one up. You'll notice there's 2 supplied nuts there. I want you to loosen it all the way. Take it off. Go ahead and spin one of those nuts off. Hold on to that, thread this one back in all the way, and spin the nut on from behind. And I'll show you what that looks like. You might be able to see from here, but the ramp now has significantly more lean. You'll notice when I go and I shut the rear door, it no longer makes contact with the doors. If this is acceptable, go ahead and we'll dial it in. If you'd like to bring it back out, you feather that rubber bumper out a little further. The interesting thing to note, again, is the driver's side dictates the movement, the passenger side follows. So get this dialed in first, and then you come over here. You can take your finger right now and you can make sure that this metal bracket is making positive contact with this rubber bumper. If there was a gap there, you would want to be sure to thread this rubber bumper out to meet the metal plate. Again, in this case, it's good. So what we can do is spin this out, take your 13mm wrench, and tighten the nut on this rubber bumper. We did not have to adjust this one. Make sure it's tight though, not going anywhere. It looks to be, and we're good. The next adjustment is what we call our J-hook adjustment. I'd like to go over the operation so you understand how this piece of mechanical works. This is your locking arm here that you usually open or spin backwards to use to deploy the ramp. It's doing two things. One is inside in between the ramp itself, there's a metal finger that raises and lowers. And what that does is it grabs the two leaves and pulls them together so they're not clapping going down the road. The second thing, and the more visible thing, is over there on the driver's side, you'll notice that arm moving. That's our J-hook there. And what that is that is our limit for rearward travel. So if we adjust that J-hook, that will keep it from bouncing around as we go down the road. You're going to want to have two 17mm wrenches on hand to do this. And you'll notice specifically because we had adjusted our rubber bumper and leaned the ramp in, there's nearly a finger's width of gap underneath that J-hook against this blue powder-coated stud. We're going to want to raise that J-hook up. And it's important to note that we're not looking to have it grab or touch this blue powder-coated stud. We want it to be just underneath it. And there's two reasons for that. One, the powder coat can be sticky, and two, it can cause it to be stuck. This is intended to be more of a limit and allows for a little bit of movement in the ramp, but yet keeps it secure and firm. If you were looking to tighten that up and make it more of a tight fit, what you'll notice is if you were to grab against the ramp and compress that rubber bumper a little bit, that gap would increase. And so what you can do is you can adjust that J-hook up, maybe get it to where it's just touching there, and you'll notice if you come back, it would allow it to grab on snugly. Some of this is going to be up to your discretion on how tightly you want this to work. Once I do this, I'll show you what I'm talking about a little bit more once it's in the stored position. But to break these loose, go ahead and flip this out and get your two 17s on here. Beautiful. And now we're going to raise the J-hook. Okay, at this point I've got it in a good position. It just barely clears that stud. Go ahead and tighten these down. And this can be tricky. That J-hook does want to turn, so keep an eye on it. Don't just grab on the wrenches without watching that. Okay, and what that allows us to do is when we close the ramp, this can then be locked, and you only have this much rearward travel. If you wanted to have it be a tighter fit, something along the lines of a spring-loaded type feel, what you'd want to do is you'd want to be consistently putting pressure with your left hand to compress that rubber bumper and take the pressure off the J-hook so that this freely moves over there. Again, some of this is stuff that you'll just have to play with and get it set to your own liking. All right, let's talk a little bit about these foam blocks. These are intended as a backup type measure. You can imagine if you folded the ramp up and didn't lock it, the ramp would be moving around back here wildly. Or you could imagine maybe you don't have it quite adjusted right and it's making more contact with the rear doors than you'd like, and you're getting that metal on metal type feel. The idea is to take your foam block here, and you're going to want to have the door shut and look at about where that ramp would be making contact with the foam block. In this case, we leaned this ramp in quite a ways. So up at the top here, there's a big gap. This would not work. If you had it leaned closer to the rear doors, maybe up here would be a good position for it. In my situation, I'm going to be making good contact down here, maybe about the height of the handle. That's something you're going to have to decide, but what you would do is you'd peel this sticker off the back of the foam block, place it on there, and what you're going to want to do is make sure that this foam block is making good contact with your side rail. I'm not going to be able to show you this because I'm outside the vehicle, but it is sometimes easier to place this if the door was shut and you were to go in from the inside. But it'd end up probably being, let's see if we can fudge it, very close to right there. And they end up just being stuck as so. Complete the step on the driver's side door as well. Okay, this nearly concludes the install process. I would like to go over one or two comments. Let's go ahead and deploy the ramp again. If you were to, again, place some firm pressure on the ramp, compress that rubber bumper so that the J-hook is allowed to be freed. Place a hand on both of the black handles and walk the ramp out. You will notice typically the passenger side hinge does come together and makes good contact. But if you follow me over here to the driver's side, you'll notice that this hinge floats a little. It doesn't have complete contact. This is something we get a lot of calls from installers and people putting this in as a what did I do wrong type question. And I would like to explain that these two springs here put a lot of tension on this driver's side and causes that little bit of lift. If you put some weight on the ramp, that comes together and it's no more of a visual concern. But I'd like to point out specifically that this is a feature, not a flaw, and it's something inherent in the design. If potentially after a year of heavy use, maybe you wear these springs out a little bit and they'll relax, but for the most part, it will be with you for the life of the ramp. At this point, it's going to conclude our install portion of the video. I would encourage you to watch video 3, which will be coming next. That is going to cover the operation of the ramp itself. So it'll be geared more towards an end user operator or the employee who is tasked with operating the vehicle. And at this point, I should mention also that if you had any questions during the video, we are here to help. You are not doing this alone. Please give us a call. Our number is going to be 763-762-3451. Please give us a call. We are here to assist you with questions, comments, or concerns. And finally, I'll note, just as a recap, this was an install of a swivel loading ramp in a Dodge RAM ProMaster. It's a WM Systems ramp and our new no-drill mounting hardware, which requires no drilling into the vehicle body. Again, I'm Jacob with National Fleet Products. Thanks for watching.